This is where you end up for treatment when you have nothing. Battle wounds notwithstanding, beds aren't always included. At the Rohingya unit of the district Sadar hospital, survivors share the trauma and the hallway. So this one woman had shrapnel wounds in her leg, and she had a tiny little baby, this little child with her, on the cold stone floor on just a white sheet, no attention, just a foot wrapped up in gauze and in the open hallway. I've never seen anything like that anywhere. When people start to say that hundreds of thousands of people are on the move in this day and age, in the modern day world, because of violence and crossing a border, it really catches your attention. But unless you go there, until you actually step foot into some of those refugee camps and go next to the border there, I don't think you really have a good idea of what's going on. Anguish is a heavy load carried across borders. On the final leg of an epic escape, they come with it in the thousands. At one point, Richard Deavy, our cameraman, was filming as the column was walking by, and this man stopped. I guess he could tell what we were doing, and he just looked at Richard and started talking. Dean Mohammed says they were firing in my area and even called us out from our home and then slit my father's throat. And when he was done telling his story, he walked away. Just off the edge of Bangladesh, it would have been impossible to look away. A front row view to the horrors of the past month, an island full of witnesses now stranded in no man's land. There was about 1,300 people in this tiny little patch of land, and I thought this was the most remarkable part of the story, is that it was sad enough to watch all these people walking for days to get to safety in Bangladesh. Here are these people who tried to do that and ended up in a spot where they couldn't move. So they were living in difficult conditions, very cramped, lots of tents, lots of kids, and they were cut off from both countries. Suddenly, I saw from afar, this large group of women together, kind of gliding through the water and coming over and sitting under kind of a little canopy, where our producer, Stephanie Genzer, actually had the first chance to go talk to them. The look on our producer's face kind of gave me a preview of what I was about to hear, or gave me a sense that these were not going to be ordinary conversations. Noor Asha lives there in a tent. With the demons of the day, she had both her home and her dignity taken away. She was very stoic, as she described how she got sort of stuck in her home while everybody else had fled, and how a number of men in uniform accosted her and one by one had taken turns raping her. But before we got to that, before I actually heard the details, our producer was translating, and at one point he couldn't speak anymore because he started to cry. She says they were military and that it's destroyed her. There's pain in my back, pain in my belly, and when I cough, blood comes out, she says. I didn't know how to conclude that interview. What kinds of questions do you ask when you hear a story like that? Those are the things that were going through my mind, is what is a follow-up, an appropriate follow-up question when someone tells you they've been raped repeatedly by soldiers? I couldn't really come up with a question. I kind of let her talk. But I remember that I didn't know how to walk away from her. It was one of the toughest interviews I've ever had to do, I think. It's here the border guards introduced us to Anjuara Begum. Of her 4 children, only one remains. 2 are missing. The other, she says, thrown into a fire by Burmese soldiers right in front of her. They snatched my 3-month-old baby and turned him to ash, she says. We only go to places to cover some of the most difficult situations that people go through. So we hear some pretty awful things. But this one has to be one of the most difficult stories I've ever heard, and one of the most shocking I've ever heard. How do you ever get over the fact that you watched your youngest burn in a fire? I just can't imagine that. And those are the thoughts that go through your mind when you're doing this interview. Never mind the fact that you can't ask questions after that. What do you say? In the hundreds of thousands, they have made their case. And so now they wait. Nahlah Ayed, CBC News at the Bangladesh-Myanmar border.